First, thank you to the organizers of this extraordinary event, to the Mayor of Lublin, and to the citizens of Lublin for inviting me to come to this wonderful city of yours. Why are we discussing today this idea of the right to the city? There are two historic reasons why we're doing that. First, at the beginning of the 21st century, we witnessed massive urbanization taking place in many parts of the planet. Second, we witnessed massive immigration taking place from the east to the west, from the south to the north of our planet. In 2007, the majority of humanity, for the first time in history, the majority of the humanity was to be found living in cities. This has enormous political, social, cultural, and economic consequences. First time in history. First time in history also, the migration patterns from east to west, from south to north. 65 million people are on the move, leaving their native lands and wanting to find a new space, a new place to go and live. 65 million people. The consequence of urbanization, massive urbanization, and this massive migration that has taken place is that it has created enormous problems, enormous contradictions within the cities, the major cities of the world, and the smaller cities also. Cities, especially big cities, have become cancer wards. Places where human health is in danger, while at the same time human health has improved. On the other hand, it has also deteriorated as a result of air pollution, as a result of the deterioration of the quality of water that we drink, as a result of smog hanging over cities because of industrial activities in and around the city. For example, where I come from, in Canada, the whole part of the major industrial and economic heartland of Canada, southern Ontario, is covered many months of the year with smog, a kind of gray cloud that keeps all the pollution that is coming from the south towards the north over the cities, over the industrial and agricultural areas of southern Ontario. And as a result, thousands of people go to hospitals, hundreds of them die, especially young children and the elderly. And this is a worldwide phenomenon, especially in the northern hemisphere. And now we have climate change, caused by human beings, by human society. The IPCC, the International Panel created by the United Nations, the International Panel on Climate Change, which is, as you know, a worldwide association of some 3,000 climate change scientists, after several reports with many behind-the-scenes struggles with politicians and with bureaucrats, state bureaucrats, this IPCC, this very authoritative scientific body, finally was allowed to say that the cause of climate change is human society. So we have a problem. We have a very serious problem with fossil fuel cars, trucks, buses, the reduction of green spaces in cities, the environmental crisis or the deterioration of nature with floods, with heat waves, with storms, with pollution of the sea, etc., 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 have been aggravated by urbanization. Cities import the richness of nature, including lublin. They import the riches of nature, and they export in huge amounts garbage into nature. What we have to recognize is that the relationship between cities or the built environment and the surrounding ecosystem or nature is in fact in a state of war. Our societies are at war with nature. Our economic system largely based on private profit and corporate profit and growth for the sake of growth are at war with nature. Dear friends, this war has to stop. What, therefore, have I learned during the many decades of trying to understand and analyze reality? A conclusion is that the environmental crisis is in fact a social crisis. Fundamentally, it is a social crisis. It is a crisis within our society. Nature will survive our attacks. It is society that we live in which may very well be destroyed if we don't take the measures to reverse the process. How can this future, this dark future, be averted? In 1948, at the end of that horrendous experience called the Second World War, the General Assembly of the United Nations adopted, 1948, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. All the countries signed it, whether they were liberal democracies or whether they were dictatorships. Because they said, well, it is a moral document. We more or less agree with it. We will sign it. There is no law behind it. It's not enforceable. So we will sign it. And between you and me, not many institutions took it terribly seriously. But what has happened since 1948 till today is that there are very few human beings on the face of the planet who do not know that they have human rights. And if you read the Universal Declaration, you will see what those rights articulate, what they stand for. And therefore, we as human beings across the planet have become self-conscious that over and above being born, over and above growing up here or there, we also have rights. We have rights vis-a-vis the state and vis-a-vis powerful institutions in our society. And this has given us a new perspective on our place in humanity and in history. Later on, in decades that followed, in this process of massive urbanization, a new conception of human rights began. And as a result, in 2000, for example, in Saint-Denis, in France, which is just outside of Paris, and even before that, in 1992, in Rio de Janeiro, in Brazil, the idea that we are not simply human beings, we are not simply Poles, Canadians, French, Germans, we are also citizens of cities, that we have a place in our city that has to be recognized by all authority, political, economic, and cultural. And as a result of this gurgitating of ideas, in 2001, in Brazil, a country that has an extraordinary constitution, national constitution, a world charter of human rights to the city was conceptualized, declared, and worked upon. In 2010, the European Charter of the Rights of the City was drafted by urban movements and activists in various cities in Europe. Another important moral document, which was then advanced by the UCLG, United Cities and Local Authorities, which is a worldwide federation and association of cities in different parts of the world. The UCLG promoted the European Charter of Rights of the City, and then they even took it further and developed an even more expansive and inclusive charter of rights to the city. And so a big debate and a big social movement was born in South America, Latin America, Central America, Europe, and North America, and began spreading. And so that, for example, my city, Montreal, in 2001, our new municipal government decided that they were going to consult in a very large way once they were elected. They were going to consult the citizens of Montreal as to what they wanted, what they desired in the area of the environment, in the area of democracy, in the area of housing, in the area of public transportation, in the area of economic development, in the area of cultural diversity and cultural advancement. So the city of Montreal and the mayor of Montreal invited over 3,000 Montrealers to come together in small groups, in medium-sized groups, and in large assemblies to discuss what the citizens want. And one of the ideas that we put forward in the urban movement that I was involved in was the idea that Montreal had to have a charter of rights to the city. what are our rights in Montreal, and what is the responsibility of the city and of the mayor towards the citizens. And so a task force was created on municipal democracy. The mayor asked me to be the president of this task force, and we worked for several years to articulate a remarkable document called the Montreal Charter of Rights and Responsibilities. And there are copies of this charter outside for you to see. In that charter, there is a chapter on democracy, there's a chapter on environment, there's a chapter on the environment, on culture, and so on and so forth. But for me, the most interesting part of the charter is under the chapter on democracy. And under Article 16 in that charter, there is a recognition of the right to citizen initiative. What is the right to citizen initiative? It gives every single citizen in Montreal the right to come together with other citizens and to demand a public consultation on an important question facing the neighborhood that they live in or the city as a whole. They collect a certain number of signatures, and the political class, the city of Montreal, has to then organize formal, open, transparent, professionally organized public consultation. And you know what? Thousands of people participate. And what is the significance of that? The significance of that is this. Citizens of Montreal don't have to wait every 4 years to put a piece of paper in a box and to vote for a city councilor or to vote for a mayor or mayors. In between the 4 years, they can initiate a whole public debate, a whole public discussion, a whole public consultation, and they can say, well, coming out of that consultation, we propose that there should be better housing in this district and in that district, or we propose that there have to be more stringent environmental protection of this green space and that green space. So what we have succeeded in doing in that city is to take the large questions that affect society as a whole, bring them down to the local level, but empower citizens to formulate public policy and enter into a fierce, dynamic debate with the political class, with the civil servants, with the bureaucrats, and say, this is what thousands of people wanted to do. So it is a very formal, but very transparent and very dynamic process. And it has institutionalized a form of local democracy which was so unique that it was recognized by UNESCO in Paris as being a model for other cities. A model for other cities. And so the city of Gwangju, a very important city in South Korea, adopted the idea of a charter for the citizens of Gwangju. The city of Mexico, which is a huge city, also adopted the idea of having a charter of rights for the citizens of Mexico. And so our Montreal Charter of Rights and Responsibilities is a historic document, and I would urge the citizens of Lublin, here present, to take the charter and say, how can we have a similar charter in our city here? How can we have, in a document, a very clear declaration on the part of the city of Lublin, admitting its responsibilities towards us as citizens and what our responsibilities are towards the city as a whole. So we have institutionalized human rights in the city, and other cities have taken this as an example. But we have done more, because it's all very well to talk about social participation and citizen participation. But unless local democracy is institutionalized, underline that word, and there are tools, institutional tools, with which citizens can participate in the creation of a new politics, it's just buchacha. So we created in Montreal the Office of Public Consultation. The Office of Public Consultation. Again, there are documents outside that explain that. The Office of Public Consultation is an office that organizes at a very professional level, a very credible level, how citizens can participate in, for example, questions of the urban master plan. If there is going to be a building here, or a neighborhood here has to be rebuilt, or some new project is going to be put forward, a public consultation has to take place, and the citizens can say, we are happy with this, we're not happy with this, we propose this modification, that modification. And by citizens, I also mean architects participate, urban planners participate, academics in our 4 universities participate, students participate, citizens as such participate, and so there's a very rich political culture that is being generated slowly but surely in that city. So when we talk about culture, please also take into consideration that a very key part, if not a central part, of culture is to have a political culture. A political culture in which citizens are self-conscious of themselves as actors in the future evolution of their society. So we have the Office of Public Consultation. We also have an Office of an Ombudsman. What is an ombudsman? In the Montreal Charter of Rights and Responsibilities, which is not a moral document, it is a legal document. It is a law. It's not like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of 1948. It is a law. And in that law, a citizen who has a complaint about the mayor, about a city councilor, about a civil servant, can deposit a complaint at the Office of the Ombudsman. And the Ombudsman, which has an annual budget of $1.5 million and 14 lawyers who work for it, have to investigate that complaint, see whether it is justified, and try to find a solution between the complaining citizen and the person or persons that they're complaining about, to find a better way to communicate and to try to resolve the problem to the satisfaction of the citizen. That's another important institution, the Office of the Ombudsman. We also have, of course, like here in Lublin, we have city council meetings. But city council meetings are not as interesting. The definition of citizen in the Charter of Rights and Responsibilities in Montreal is anybody who lives on the territory of Montreal or is in the territory of Montreal. You don't have to be a Canadian citizen in order to enjoy the rights of citizenship under the Montreal Charter of Rights and Responsibilities. That's very important. You could be a refugee that just arrived from Syria a month ago. You still have the same rights for housing, for environmental protection, for cultural activities, as any other old-time citizen of the city. That's a very important democratic principle. As a matter of fact, you may know this already, but in several important European cities, non-citizens, immigrants or refugees, are given the right to vote during municipal elections. How many of you knew that? Now, all of this is interesting, but we face some very serious problems. Very serious problems. I am an economist by education, but I'm an ecologist by vocation. And I'm a social ecologist by my self-education in the whole area of ecological economics, for example. And what I've learned is that, and I'm sure we agree on this, that if we do not take seriously the need to declare peace with nature, the need to declare a new relationship between society and nature, we face terrible problems that we can hardly imagine. But in order to create this new relationship with nature within our cities and surrounding our cities, in order to create this new peaceful relationship with nature, to stop the war, we have to transform our society. We have to transform our cities. And therefore, we have to democratize democracy. Democracy is never a process that comes to an end. It is always a work in progress. So every time we have to find new ways, innovative ways, intelligent ways to improve our democratic participation in the daily affairs of our city. But we cannot have a democratic city if it is not an ecological city. And it cannot be an ecological city if it is not a profoundly democratic city. We have to convince, in one way or the other, the political class in our city that they have to open up the doors and windows of power. They are not elected by God. There is no longer the divine rule of kings. That was abolished in 1789. Simply because a politician is elected doesn't give herself or himself the right to decide secretly or even publicly certain very powerful and important questions. They have to be opened up to everybody who is capable of participating in an intelligent and informed way in the public discussion and the direction of which our city is to take place. Very important. But at the core of this, democratize the city, transform it into an ecological city, transform it from an ecological city to a democratic city. At the core of this is the environmental crisis. Now let me bring my discussion here to a gradual conclusion by saying this. Many of you remember, perhaps, that the Vice President of the United States, the former Vice President of the United States, Al Gore, when he got finished with politics, he became an environmentalist. And he made a very interesting film called Unconventional Truth, in which he surveyed the major features of the ecological crisis that we find ourselves against. And try to remember his conclusion. Try to remember his conclusion. His conclusion was that it is not likely that the solution to the environmental crisis, which is profoundly, in my view, a social crisis, the solution to the environmental crisis is not likely to happen at the level of national governments. His conclusion, former Vice President of the United States, his conclusion is the solution to the environmental crisis begins at the level of the city. The cities is where the ball is going to start rolling towards solutions. When I went to the World Urban Forum in Naples, organized by the United Nations Habitat, the open declaration, the first statement by the General Secretary of the United Nations, Ban Ki-moon at the time, said to all of us, he said, ladies and gentlemen, as General Secretary of the United Nations, I say to you that the solution to the environmental crisis is going to happen at the level of the city, not at the level of national governments. And so we come to COP21 in Paris, held in December of 2015. All the big politicians were there, the so-called statesmen. They were all there. But who else was there? There were over 2,000 mayors that came from across the planet to also deliberate as to what their responsibilities are, what their city's responsibilities are. So in the midst of the power struggle that was going on behind the scenes to come up with this 35-page treaty on climate change control, there was a realization by the presence of the mayors and their entourages and many people from civil society, there was a recognition that they had a major role, not a minor role, a major role to play in the transformation of this whole situation. Very significant. And so when the 35-page document was signed by the national governments, there was a disquiet, there was a discomfort, there was a distrustful attitude amongst the thousands of activists that came from across Europe and across the planet to create an atmosphere of hope. But they did not leave with much hope. And therefore, they articulated a very important idea, which is connected with the right to the city. The idea was expressed in the following words: not climate change, system change. Big demonstrations were held in Paris, 2 big ones, even though it was against the law to have a demonstration. But the mayor of Paris was intelligent enough, a very interesting and intelligent woman, and said, let the people demonstrate in the streets. Their demonstration was articulated by this idea: not climate change, system change. In other words, we have to change the system. We have to change the way we function as societies. And therefore we have to create cities where there is gender equality, where there is an articulated sense of social justice, where there is a real program for ecological responsibility and transformation, where we have to create new democratic institutions through which and with which citizens can not only participate, not only be consulted, but also help make decisions. Decision-making is not the monopoly of politicians. It is not the monopoly of politicians. It has to be done in partnership with society. So let me conclude by saying two things, a two-part conclusion, if you will. First, outside, there is a display of books and periodicals. These are documents available to all of you here, which unfortunately are not available in the rest of Poland. And so you have a unique opportunity to look at them and decide what you would like to take home with you. Don't lose the opportunity. And my second conclusion is a hopeful conclusion. Because here in my brain, I'm pessimistic. But here in my heart, when I see all of you and the many citizens that I talk to, I'm optimistic. Here are my concluding words. What gives the growing world movement working on an alternative an edge, an advantage, is that capitalism and the state have no solution to the ecological crisis and in no way halt the social collapse that will inevitably result. History was supposed to end, remember? With the end of state socialism, with the fall of the Soviet Union, the triumph of capitalism 2 decades ago, yet today, history is rushing on, and we are living in one of the most pivotal and world-changing moments, perhaps the most crucial moment. We may be approaching a new dark era when civilization collapses, but the means to stop this possible wreckage are also in the making. Struggles against the destruction of the environment continue around the planet, and the urban resistance is following suit. Today, my friends, we are on the edge of a sea change, of near simultaneous mass democratic resurgences. One almost global in its scale. The planetary rebellion is still developing, still unsure of its future, but in its radical democratic instincts are humanity's best and last hope. Let us be inspired by what human beings and what movements, social movements, are doing in various parts of the world. And let's conclude by saying, citizens of Lublin, network with other people in other cities in Poland, across Europe, across the planet, and let us work together for a better world. Thank you very much for your attention.
Dimitrios Roussopoulos. It's a piękny wykład. Dimitrios, thank you very much for an inspiring speech. Let me cite words of Jewish prophet whom you know, Horowitz, known as sinner of Lublin. He said once, Lublin is a navel of the world. Lublin is a cosmic center. Wasn't he right?
He was.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Proszę Państwa, kontynuujemy. Dimitri, thank you. We're not running the session of question and answers. We keep continue.
Of course, of course.
Right? Okay.
You're going to ask the first question?
No, we don't have answers.
What would you like?
Well, we'd like to continue. Could you please step off the stage?
Off the stage? You mean jump over the stage?
No, the stairs, or the backstage,
Yep.
if you will. Nieprzewidziana zmiana w programie. Nie będziemy mieli, proszę Państwa, sesji pytań i odpowiedzi. To nie jest ten format, który przewidzieliśmy. Kontynuujemy nasze wydarzenie. Miasta to centra cywilizacji. Wiemy doskonale, czujemy to, że to w nich następują największe zmiany. To one są miejscami, w których kwitnie kultura, w którym dokonuje się postęp. To one są miejscami, w których społeczności miejskie najpełniej przejawiają swoją kreatywność. Ale miasta to też centra dowodzenia światem. One stają się coraz ważniejsze, coraz bardziej istotne. Mówi się, że ważniejsze nawet niż terytoria krajowe. Dlatego też Benjamin Barber, zmarły niedawno filozof miasta i krytyk polityczny, twierdził, że to burmistrzowie powinni rządzić światem. Dlatego chciałbym zaprosić na scenę głównodowodzącego Lublina.